The engines roared into the morning fog, a low growl vibrating through the cabin floor. The plane had lifted off, but only barely. A strange drag hung in the air, a heaviness that defied logic. The passengers glanced out the windows, expecting the world below to shrink fast, yet it didn't. The clouds stayed too close, the city lights too clear. In the cockpit, quiet confusion replaced routine chatter. Gauges showed green, but the climb felt wrong. Every second stretched, every sound magnified. The groan of engines, the rattle of trays, the captain's short breaths. The co-pilot's hand hovered above the throttle, uncertain whether to push harder or pull back. The nose trembled in turbulence, then steadied again, but not higher. The altimeter numbers froze, defying belief. How could everything look right and feel so wrong? And when the co-pilot finally realized the truth, why was it already too late? The aircraft hung in the air like it didn't belong there. The captain's voice cut through static, sharp, calm, desperate. Instructions to check pitch trim, flaps, thrust balance, every word overlapping with rising alarms. The co-pilot scanned the list twice, but everything looked normal. Below, the ground rolled slowly by, far too close for comfort. Inside the cabin, silence swallowed conversation. A few passengers began to whisper prayers. The flight attendant felt every shiver of metal as if it came from her bones. Each second without altitude felt stolen. The co-pilot's hand trembled on the checklist again. Why was the aircraft so heavy? Why did the instruments lie? Passengers began to notice. A child asked why the ground was still visible. A man checked his watch, then the window, then the flight attendant, who forced a smile too late. Her eyes darted toward the cockpit door. Inside, muffled voices argued over the intercom. The sound of flaps adjusting echoed down the cabin. Then a jolt, subtle but unmistakable. The aircraft shifted nose up for a second, then sagged again. The engines strained louder, too loud for comfort. The sense of ascent was gone. Only vibration remained. Fear spread in silence like smoke no one could see. The captain called for manual control. The co-pilot disengaged autopilot with a metallic click that felt final. The plane dipped slightly before leveling. Both men leaned forward as if willing the aircraft higher by force. Outside, clouds tore apart, revealing city rooftops alarmingly close. A blip of panic flashed in both sets of eyes. The co-pilot muttered something under his breath, but his voice broke midway. He adjusted the trim again, but the system resisted. It wasn't malfunctioning, it was following command logic. The realization began to form, half buried in denial. The air traffic controller's voice crackled through static. Flight 271. Your climb rate is unstable. Confirm altitude. The captain's reply came measured, too steady to be real. Working the issue, he said. The co-pilot glanced down. The reading was wrong, but so was the feel of the plane. Somewhere between automation and error, control had slipped away. The controller tried again, urgency rising. Silence followed. Then a sound. A mechanical groan deep within the fuselage. Something wasn't just off. Something was locked. The plane drifted in stubborn equilibrium, engines clawing against invisible resistance. The captain's jaw tightened as he fought to maintain lift. Clouds churned outside like waves of gray fire, swallowing the horizon. The co-pilot's breathing quickened, his voice cracking as he read numbers that refused to change. Warnings blinked, each tone sharper than the last. "We're level," the captain muttered, as if denying gravity itself. The co-pilot adjusted again. Same result. The controls felt sluggish, like moving through syrup. In the cabin, a child's cry rose, swallowed by the roar. Somewhere in that noise, a truth was hiding, waiting to be discovered too late. In the control tower, disbelief filled the silence. The air traffic controller stared at her radar, a green dot, barely climbing. Her voice trembled. but stayed professional. 271, check weight configuration. On the other end, Static replied. Then the captain's voice, thin, distant, almost disembodied. Stand by. She bit her lip. Every instinct screamed something was wrong, but procedures demanded calm. Outside, the morning brightened into golden fog, the kind that hides everything dangerous in beauty. The captain ordered full thrust. The co-pilot obeyed. The engines screamed higher, deep vibrations coursing through the fuselage. Passengers gasped as the sound grew almost unbearable. The flight attendant stumbled in the aisle, grabbing a seat as turbulence slammed through the plane. Coffee splashed over trays. A baby cried. Every eye looked toward the cockpit door, as though willing it to open and explain, but it stayed shut. The co-pilot's voice cut through comms, sharp and uncertain. She won't climb. The captain's silence was answer enough. A tremor rolled through the wings as the co-pilot checked trim indicators again. Numbers, normal. Systems, normal. Every display agreed. The captain's voice was calm now. Too calm. If everything's right, he said, then what's wrong? Outside, clouds thinned to reveal the city's sprawl, rising uncomfortably close. The aircraft's belly caught glints of sunlight, but altitude refused to rise. The co-pilot's eyes darted toward the fuel readout, then to the flight log. Something didn't match. His throat tightened. The calculation. They never recalculated after refueling. The co-pilot's realization hit like turbulence inside his mind. The plane wasn't malfunctioning. It was obeying a mistake. The takeoff weight input had been wrong from the start. Every system had compensated perfectly for a lie. The engines pushed against physics that refused to yield. He turned to the captain, voice shaking but firm. We're too heavy. The system thinks we're lighter. Silence, then a long exhale. The captain didn't respond, just adjusted pitch slightly, as though buying seconds from fate. The co-pilot's eyes flicked to the window. Ground still too close. It was no longer a climb. It was a countdown. Inside the cockpit, the air had grown heavy enough to taste. The captain stared straight ahead, his reflection ghosted in the glass. The altimeter showed a lie wrapped in confidence. Everything's still normal. The captain tapped the gauge as if force could make truth appear. Outside, clouds broke apart into streaks, revealing outlines of hills rising too soon. They were running out of climb and out of explanations. The hum of the engines deepened, the fuselage trembling as speed rose instead of altitude. Below, the city spread like a silent witness. In the cabin, unease turned to open panic. The flight attendant's professional calm cracked as she tried to reassure trembling passengers. Just turbulence, she lied. Voice brittle. The plane rattled again, overhead bins shuddering. A man shouted a question. No one answered. The sound of strained engines filled every space. She glanced toward the cockpit, the door sealed and silent. Something inside her said, they weren't climbing. They were fighting gravity, one desperate second at a time. Back in the tower, the air traffic controller's calm slipped. Flight 271. Do you require assistance? She asked, her tone no longer routine. The radar showed a strange pattern, speed increasing, altitude stagnant. She called again, louder. Silence. Only static and faint distortion returned. Her heart began to race. In her mind, she replayed hundreds of training scenarios, none like this. She looked at her supervisor, who only nodded gravely. They both knew the signs. A plane that won't climb means one thing. Something's gone terribly wrong. Weight recalculated. The co-pilot whispered, fingers trembling as he double-checked. His voice was hollow, disbelief curdling into guilt. The captain's eyes flicked toward him. Say that again, he said quietly. The truth hung between them like smoke. Every preflight number had been wrong. The autopilot had trimmed for an impossible configuration. The captain didn't curse, didn't move. He just stared at the controls with a look that combined anger and resignation. Then, softly, "We can't climb because we never could." The co-pilot looked out the side window. Hills cut the horizon now, closer than they should be. He could see tree lines, rooftops glinting with morning dew. For a moment, the sound of engines faded into an echo, like holding breath underwater. Then the captain spoke, quiet but final. "We'll have to dump fuel." It was a desperate choice, one that meant circling on the edge of control. The co-pilot nodded and reached for the lever, his hand trembling. Outside, sunlight burst through the fog, blinding him. The plane began to bank. Everything that followed would happen in seconds. Fuel streamed into the sky in a misty arc, catching sunlight like liquid fire. The plane banked wide, sluggish, its engines howling in protest. The captain monitored the gauges, watching numbers drop too slowly. The co-pilot's eyes darted between trim settings and horizon, fear masked behind forced calm. "Fuel dump active," he said. The words sounded mechanical, detached from meaning. Below them, the land stretched like a painting they couldn't leave. The airspeed climbed slightly, but so did the ground beneath them. In the cabin, people whispered prayers, some clutching hands, some frozen in disbelief. The illusion of control was gone. Inside the cabin, the flight attendant moved seat by seat, voice steady despite her shaking hands. She told them everything was standard procedure, but the lie sat heavy in her throat. The engine's roar never eased. A young man asked if they were returning to the airport. She smiled and nodded, though she had no answer. She had seen enough flights to know what panic looked like, and this was beyond it. The smell of fuel seeped faintly through ventilation, mixing with recycled air. She closed her eyes for one heartbeat too long, then kept walking, pretending to believe her own words. The air traffic controller's monitor showed an erratic path now, a slow, uneven turn. "They're circling," she whispered. She opened her channel again, voice trembling but clear. "Flight 271, altitude check, please confirm." Static. Then a faint reply, nearly interference. "Dumping fuel, minimal climb." Her heart sank. Protocol dictated she escalate the emergency, but procedure felt pointless against that tone. Behind her, a supervisor leaned closer. "Get emergency units on standby," he said. She nodded, eyes locked on the radar. The green dot blinked slower now. Each pulse felt like a heartbeat fading. The co-pilot ran the numbers again, lighter now, but the climb barely improved. He could feel the strain in every vibration underfoot. "Still heavy," he said softly. The captain didn't respond. He was staring at the artificial horizon, watching the blue line tremble. "Pitch up 5 degrees, he said. The co-pilot obeyed. The nose rose, the engine screamed. A sudden shudder rocked the cockpit. The stick felt loose for a split second, then solid again. They exchanged a glance that said what neither dared to voice. They were running out of margin. In the next minute, everything changed. The co-pilot glanced down at the trim indicator one last time and saw movement where there shouldn't be. The autopilot was fighting them, subtly, quietly, as if unwilling to surrender control. The system wasn't broken. It was following its last command perfectly. The captain reached forward to disengage it, but the warning tone screamed again. Hands moved faster. Voices rose, every second a blur. "Manual override," the captain shouted. The co-pilot pulled hard. The plane jolted upward, nose lifting at last, but too sharply. The stall alarm pierced the air like a blade. The stall warning shrieked through the cockpit, a mechanical scream that froze time. The captain's hands jerked the yoke forward, fighting gravity with instinct, not logic. The co-pilot's knuckles went white around the throttle. The plane dipped violently, passengers gasping as drinks and papers flew. The sound of loose metal echoed through the cabin, like the aircraft itself crying out. I'd pulled too high, too fast. The nose lowered, engine straining to find lift again. The co-pilot's voice was hoarse. Recovering. The captain nodded once, jaw clenched. Silence fell for half a breath before the next alarm began. The plane steadied, but only barely. The stall tone faded into a low buzz, cruelly calm. The captain breathed out, whispering something that sounded like a prayer. The co-pilot wiped sweat from his forehead, shaking. Below, rooftops grew sharper. "We need altitude," the captain said. "We need options," the co-pilot replied. But the gauges mocked them. Airspeed fine. Everything fine, except they were still barely climbing. The captain's voice hardened. "Flaps 2, climb power." The co-pilot obeyed. The aircraft responded sluggishly, like an exhausted animal. Hope was no longer part of the checklist. Inside the cabin, silence clung to every seat. The flight attendant moved slowly down the aisle, checking belts, whispering reassurances she no longer believed. A passenger whispered, "Are we falling?" She forced a smile. "No, sir. Just turbulence." Her words trembled like the cabin walls. Through a window, sunlight flashed across the wing. Droplets of fuel shimmered like glittering ghosts. The engine's roar felt distant now, muffled by dread. Somewhere behind her, someone began to cry softly. She didn't turn. She couldn't. "Manual trim override," the captain said through clenched teeth. The co-pilot reached down, found the wheel stiff, unmoving. He forced it, arms shaking, a metallic groan filling the cockpit. Slowly, the trim shifted, nose leveling. The aircraft responded. Slightly, then more. The altimeter ticked upward. They exchanged a look that mixed disbelief with hope. For the first time in minutes, the plane began to climb. But the joy lasted seconds. A vibration rolled through the fuselage, deep and rhythmic. "That's not good," the co-pilot whispered. The captain didn't answer. He was already looking at the temperature gauge creeping red. Engines howled beyond safe limits, a thunder no human ear could mistake. The climb was happening, but at a price. The captain shouted to reduce thrust. The co-pilot complied, but the pitch dipped again. They had traded altitude for heat, survival for time. "We can't sustain this," the co-pilot said. "We don't have to," the captain answered, gaze fixed forward. "Just clear the ridge." Through the glass, the horizon broke into rolling green hills rising fast. Every muscle tensed. They were racing physics now, nothing more. The ridge rose faster than the climb. The captain's voice was a rasp now, the sound of focus stripped of everything human. "Hold her steady." The co-pilot's eyes flicked between horizon and instruments, disbelief clawing at composure. The aircraft trembled, every rivet vibrating like a warning. Airspeed was right. Pitch was right. Wah. But the ground was closer with every breath. "We're not clearing," the co-pilot whispered. The captain pushed the nose higher. The stall alarm returned. Short, cruel, final. In the cabin, gravity seemed to tilt. Drinks rolled off trays. A suitcase slid into the aisle. The flight attendant caught it mid-fall, heart hammering. Her professional calm cracked completely. Outside the small oval windows, green slopes flashed upward, shockingly near. People gasped, prayed, reached for one another. She braced herself on a seatback and whispered, "Please climb." But the aircraft only shuddered in answer. In the tower, silence broke into chaos. 271. "Pull up! Pull up!" the controller shouted, voice cracking. But only static returned. She looked to her supervisor, who was already dialing rescue frequencies. The radar trace dipped, flickered, steadied again, then began to fade. The room's fluorescent hum grew unbearable. She pulled off her headset, pressing her palms to her eyes, unwilling to watch the blip vanish. The co-pilot's instincts screamed to level out, but the captain held firm. Just one more push. The engines thundered past safe torque. Heat alarms blinked. The plane clawed at the air, metal shrieking from the strain. The ridge filled the windshield, trees distinct now. The co-pilot slammed his hand on the trim, disengaging all automation. Manual control. The nose rose a final time, trembling on the edge between flight and fall. For an instant, silence. The stall alarm died. The aircraft lifted, clearing the first tree line by meters. The cabin erupted in gasps, then applause that broke almost immediately because the engines coughed. A metallic crack echoed through the fuselage. One thrust gauge dropped to 0. The co-pilot's head snapped toward it, eyes wide. The captain's hand moved to the emergency checklist, but the page fluttered from the air vent draft. "Engine 2 failure," he said quietly. The co-pilot whispered, "We can't hold this." The horizon tilted. Smoke trailed behind the right engine, twisting into the sunrise like a scar across the sky. The cockpit filled with the smell of burnt metal and ozone. The captain's voice steadied once more, every syllable a command against chaos. "Feather engine 2." The co-pilot obeyed, fingers trembling. The aircraft shook, but stayed level for a fleeting second. Below them, the ridge flattened into a valley. Safety almost within reach. The captain's eyes flicked to the gauges, then to the ground. "We're not going to make the field," he said. The co-pilot swallowed hard, voice raw. "Then where?" Silence. The passengers felt the shift before they heard it. A low groan as the nose dropped again. The flight attendant shouted for brace positions, her voice cracking into urgency. Heads pressed forward, hands locked around seatbacks. The cabin lights flickered, dimmed, then glowed faint amber. The sound outside changed. Not the roar of flight, but the rush of air collapsing against metal. The world tilted. Someone screamed a name. The attendant whispered one last order that no one heard. In the tower, the radar blip faltered. 271 are descending! Pull up! The controller cried. No answer. Only static filled the channel, faint and distorted like wind through wires. She tried again, voice breaking. "Say altitude." Silence. Then, faintly, a male voice, calm, almost peaceful. "We've lost thrust." The words cut through her headset, final and irreversible. The radar dot vanished. For a long moment, no one moved. Then someone whispered, "Impact confirmed." The valley filled with the roar of breaking air. The captain fought the yoke until the final second, steering for a strip of grass that wasn't meant for landing. The co-pilot's voice came steady now, calm in acceptance. "Brace." The nose dipped. Sunlight flashed off the fuselage. The world folded into white noise. In that moment, before metal met Earth, they were simply suspended between will and consequence. Later, investigators walked among twisted metal, glowing in the dawnlight. The valley was silent except for radios and wind through reeds. Black soot marked the slope where the jet had carved its final arc. The cockpit voice recorder was found intact. Its final 30 seconds were replayed in a cold room miles away. Steady voices, no panic, only determination. "Well, try once more," the captain said. Then, nothing. Nothing. The co-pilot's handprint was still on the throttle when they found it. Truth, it turned out, had followed procedure perfectly, right into the ground.